Hi there. In the last video, we finished the preparation of the text block for this reback, which is here. So it's got the tube, end bands, overcast cloth joint in reverse order. So now it's a matter of preparing the boards and the spine to take the new leather spine. All right, so here you've got the covers removed from the book. I'm gonna put these two guys aside. You can see that the spine still has its original lining. You can also see that there was not an original cloth joint here. This was just a single sheet conjugate paste down. So what we're going to do next is we're going to lift the side so that the leather can go under it. I want to say at this point that if you don't have on your reference library shelf a copy of Bernard Middleton's Restoration of Leather Bindings, you should. It's kind of a necessity. I think it should still be in print. I haven't checked in a long time, and my copy is under a pile somewhere. But anyway, it's kind of the basis for all this stuff that I do in so far as doing, rebacks. But it's a very thorough examination of actually binding structure, 1800s, 1700s to 1900s, let's say. So anyway, we have a visitor. Come on, man. So the first thing we're going to do is, as I say, we're going to make a cut along the spine side of the board, maybe about a 2-3 millimeters in. We want to leave this outside strip of leather so that when the new leather, which has been paired, comes over it, it will fare down nicely onto the board. So the first step is to cut a diagonal on an angle with your utility knife. You can either freehand this or you can use a straight edge. Sometimes it's almost easier to freehand it, but because we have a lot of straight lines here, I don't want to do a real jiggly thing and have it kind of pop out, smack you in the face. So here we go, just a cut on the diagonal. Come on, Mort, take a hike. Okay. Now I'm going to take my lifting knife, give it a couple of strops. I'm going to talk about this this knife after I do the lifting on both the boards. Okay, so I'm going to come. I like to start at the far end and gently work to lift the cut edge. And you see I've got this on a fairly low angle, and I'm kind of slicing under the leather. Now, quite frankly, this is a place where things can go bad. Most of the time, those problems can be fixed in later steps. So if you cut through the original leather, don't panic, don't freak out. Just try and slice a little lower. If you have to slice into the board, that's fine. And at this stage, I can come back. And the other thing you can do is kind of torque it up a little bit. So there are a number of ways to, kind of get the leather to lift. I've actually lifted this farther than I normally would because I want you to see what's going on here. Oops, that way. Okay. So now this has been lifted. This is still here. I am going to come back with my lifting knife if I can, or maybe I use a utility knife. It's nice to clean off the edge of the board too at some stage. Oops, don't do that. Okay, if you leave some, it's not the end of the world. This is just a detail. All right, now because we've got the overcast cloth joint, we actually have to lift the paste down also. It's basically the same process, but it can get, again, scary. I'm going to pull this out a little bit. Something I didn't say before is I like to work, for a lot of these processes, like a lot of other binders, I like to work on a lithostone if you've got one. If you don't, again, don't panic. It's not the end of the world. And when I'm cutting, which I didn't do on the other side, but when you're cutting something like this, I like to hang the near edge of the board just to the edge of the lithostone. That way, if your knife slips, it'll slip off the stone and you won't giggle up your knife, you know, the cutting edge of your knife. Again, it's a detail and probably not necessary a lot of the time. But again, I'm going to come back. Let's move this over. All right. Everybody see that? Yeah. Again, I'm just going to eyeball this. If you're not comfortable that you're going to be able to do roughly the same distance on both boards, you can measure it and make a couple of divider pricks. That's fine. Keep in mind that you will see a little bit of the cloth joint here, so you want to make it look intentional. Move this down a little bit more. There we go. Now this one I'm not going to bevel because it's just paper. And there's really no thickness there. This is probably going to not go as well as the previous. Now you have to get down, you do have to kind of work down into the board a little bit, because if you just get the paper, again, it will rip. You can fix it. And if you don't panic, you can fix it fairly, what's the word I'm looking for? Won't be invisible, but it will be inconspicuous. That's the word. It's a good word. All right, can you see I'm just kind of coming underneath little by little. This is one of the many places where you need patience when you're doing this work. I'm gonna come back here. Gonna just come a little bit deeper. See that? You'll notice that it's kind of a semicircular slicing motion. Again, this is the kind of thing where you will find what works best for you. Another point, yeah, see that popped up there, but that'll be okay. I had another point and then it went away. That tore, don't worry about that. Okay, so there's that side. This can actually come off. We don't need this. Put this down. If you've got cloth reinforcements, sometimes you can get under the cloth and that'll help support the paper when you lift it. But again, for this edge, we're not going to save this. We're just going to pull it off. Okay, so there is the first board. I will probably come back and actually trim that off a little bit, but we won't worry about that at the moment. I want to get the other board done. Second board. Same deal. Ding dong. Okay. This at a diagonal, maybe 45 degrees, maybe 30 degrees from the horizontal. You do want to make sure that you get all the way through the leather when you're doing this. You don't want to have it bring you up short. Strap my knife. Sorry, you couldn't see that. Okay, start again. That was the other thing I was going to mention. On books like this where the sewing supports come up and then are laced down into the through the board so that you know, there's a lump on the outside and a lump on the inside. That's where generally the covering material, whether it's leather or paper or cloth, is a little better adhered, and that's where you're gonna, that's a point at which things can go not the way you want them to. So just be aware that the sewing stations are places where you have to be especially careful, and just slow down a little bit and make sure you get through them, or go down a little bit deeper. Here again. Get rid of this. Little trick is you can also use your lithostone as a strap. Now that I've got a nice strap, I don't do this as often as I used to, but it's nice because you don't have to look, you know, go around and look for it. It's right there. Okay. I'm pressing down pretty hard with my right hand. And quite frankly, sometimes these things just will not cooperate. And you just have to work with what you get. There we go. Other thing I neglected to mention was you'll often have the leather over the edges of the boards too. And this one didn't have any, so we didn't have to worry about it. What I normally do is I will make a cut here, okay, and lift this little flap before I actually lift the side, so that you've got the two flaps which will go back on top of, over the edges of the boards, still attached to the covering leather. All right, so that's how you lift the sides and the paste downs. Now, the spine can be, and often is, problematic because you've got the, you know, a couple of linings on there. If the leather's in pretty good shape, which this seems to be, you won't have a lot of trouble, but it's really hard to get these things off really well. One thing that I have tried several times in the past with not a lot of luck is damping the lining and then lifting it, you know, after the moisture releases the adhesive. Generally not the best idea, especially if it's old, kind of dry leather calf. It'll permanently darken it, and you really don't want to do that. So basically, you're going to have to do the best you can with the linings on the inside of the spine, and whatever won't come off, leave it. Don't, you know, you'll put a whole lot of holes in your spine, let me tell you, if you try. So I like to come in from the edge, and at some point, somewhere along the line, there it is, something will be delaminated. And basically, it's just a matter of little by little. Again, you need to exercise your muscle of patience while you do this. People used to say how much they'd like to do this, and you know, ask how they do it. And the first question I'd always ask them is, "What's your patience quotient?" Because this can be fussy work, and even if you are a fussy person, it will try you. So, you know, just a friendly warning. I suppose if I were an experienced video person, I could speed this up or cut away and come back. But I actually think it's important to, you know, for you to see just how slow the process is, because you need to understand that before you get into this. And you have to just be willing to accept that some of these things are going to take a frustrating amount of time and not necessarily give you the result that you want. So this is by way of an object lesson. Actually, while I'm doing this, we can talk a little bit about lifting knives. This is a Middleton style lifting knife, which was made for me by a local machinist. I had him make me about a half a dozen of them a bunch of years ago. And it's got a slight bevel here. It's got a long bevel here, flat here, but this is not a paring knife. Middleton's original instructions were, in his book, he originally used English-style paring knives to build, to basically grind an English-style paring knife into this shape. The one drawback with that I found is that the English knives are fairly wide, and if you're trying to get in between panels on a spine, you want something that's a little bit narrower. So this is about 1 inch mild steel stock. It has not been annealed. It just had an edge put on it. I talked about it with the guy who made these, and we kind of came to an agreement that since lifting knives, or as I explained to him, lifting knives get real dull real fast because you're cutting through a whole lot of hard stuff. And it doesn't need to be as sharp as a paring knife, but it needs to be sharp. So basically you spend a lot of your time sharpening your lifting knife. And if it's got a good annealed edge, it's still going to get dull in about maybe a little bit less time. Might stay sharp a little bit longer, but it's going to take you longer to resharpen it. So my argument was, and it's probably, I don't know if this is true or not, just easier to take some plain steel, don't anneal it, put an edge on it, use it until the edge gets really sour, and put another edge on it. So that's my argument. I'm sticking with it. I'm sure that there are folks who could make convincing arguments the other way. There are other styles of lifting knives. I know you'll see them in the catalogs. I don't have experience with them. I tend to be a little leery of knives that have a semicircular edge, just because I can control this one pretty well, as you see. The semicircular edge, I'm not sure what advantage it brings to the process. But again, that's not to say that it isn't, worth a try if you think it'll work for you. There are a lot of very tiny lifting knives out there. Or not a lot, but there are tiny, small knives. Middleton's argument, which I tend to agree with, is that if you have a wider blade, it will support whatever you're lifting more so than, let's say, if you sharpen a spatula, which a lot of us have, for doing conservation work, paper repair. So anyway, his argument, which I think made sense to me, is that the wider, up to a point, the blade, then it will support the material that you're lifting better than this will support an inch wide. This will support, like maybe a quarter of an inch wide. Again, arguments to be made on both sides. I'm just shooting my mouth off now while I'm doing this because I don't want to get too bored, although you probably already are. But if you're already really bored, you want to get into a different field of work. Okay, we're almost to the point where I'm going to call it quits here. This is actually going better than I had hoped. I won't lie, generally there are a couple of holes in the spine when I'm all done. Fritz and a lot of the old-timers would say, and I suspect it's still a common aphorism in a lot of fields, is the mark of a professional is not making no mistakes. The mark of a professional is being able to fix the mistakes that you do make. And I've I took that to heart early on, and it's been really useful. So, okay, so the only other thing I'm going to do, if I can, I'm going to see if I can get these turn-ins lifted. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. Oops, okay. I just hit the phone with my head. Here we go. Because the knife is fairly sharp, you can, insert it in between the layers. Did I move the phone? Oops. Nope, I guess it's okay. All right, almost done. Patience, young Jedi. Happens. Okay, you can see there's the bottom of the turn-in, so I can pull this back about here and make a little eye. Don't do that. Uh-oh. All right, we're getting to the point where discretion is the better part of valor. All right. And here comes the truck to wash the street. Okay, yeah, see that? You want to try and avoid that if you can, but again, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so here we have the boards prepped for the for the actual rebacking process. All right, next video we'll be pairing the leather, and then we'll put the bad boy all together. Okay, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing if you did, and if you didn't, that's okay too. Come back at some point in the very near future, and we will take this to the next step. Thanks a lot. Take care.